Wake up! It's time to go to work and review wages and compensation. Unit 2, review Part 1, wages and compensation, pay. There are two types of pay. We talked about an hourly wage, which was most common, and this is the one where you're paid for the time that you work. We also talked about piece rate. This is less common, and here you're paid for the things that you make. Regular pay and overtime pay for hourly pay work. Regular pay is earned when you work between 0 and 40 hours in a week. Overtime pay is earned when you work over 40 hours in a week. But remember, you only earn the overtime pay at a rate of 1.5 times your regular pay for the time that you worked after the 40 regular hours. So if you worked 45 hours, the first 40 hours you would earn your regular pay, and then the other 5 hours you would work your overtime pay rate. Gross pay. This is the amount of money that you earned. Hourly gross pay is found by multiplying the hours worked times the hourly pay rate. Piecework gross pay is found by multiplying the items completed times your piece rate. So this is gross pay. Now we talk about net pay, and this is the amount of money you have left after withholdings and deductions are taken out. So think of your gross pay like a pond, and you go fishing, and you have a net, and if you catch a fish in your net and you pull it out of the water, all the water runs out, which would be deductions and withholdings, and you're left with the fish, which is your net pay and what you can take home. To find hourly net pay, you have to find the gross pay, which is your hours worked times your pay rate, then subtract your deductions and withholdings to find the net pay. You use the exact same process with piecework. You first must find the gross pay, subtract deductions and withholdings, and what you're left with is your net pay. We've reviewed, so it's time to practice so you can succeed. Ready? Number 1. Al works 22 hours and earns $9.50 an hour. What is his gross pay? Well, this is an hourly pay job because he earns $9.50 an hour. So we multiply $9.50 times his hours worked, which is 22. So 22 times $9.50 is $209, and that's Al's gross pay. Question number 2. Ben works 43 hours this week and earns $12.15 an hour. What is his gross pay? Well, Ben worked over 40 hours. Did you catch that he has some overtime pay? So the first thing that we should have done is calculated the gross pay for the regular hours worked, which would be 0 to 40. Because he worked over 40, we take the full 40 hours worked and we multiply it by his hourly pay rate of $12.15. And when we do that, we find that he earns $486 regular pay. Then, because he worked over 40 hours, we have to take 43 and subtract out the 40 that we used here, and we're left with 3. But he earns an overtime pay rate, so we have to find that here. So we take his hourly pay, which is $12.15 an hour, and we multiply that by the 1.5. And when we do that, we find that his overtime pay rate is $18.22. So we multiply 3 times $18.22, and we get $54.66. So to find his total gross pay, we'll take his regular wage pay, of $486 and add his overtime pay of $54.66, and we find that he has earned a total gross pay of $540.66. If you didn't quite get that one, you might want to go back and try it again before moving on. Number 3, Cal works in a widget factory. He can make 200 widgets in 8 hours. What is his hourly production rate? Recall that production rate is the number of items made per hour. Well, Cal works in a widget factory if he makes 200 widgets in 8 hours, and production rate is the number of items made per hour. We take the number of items made first. Per means to divide, so we divide 200 by hour, which is 8. So 200 divided by 8 is 25, and therefore the production rate is 25 widgets per hour. Finally, question number 4. Diane works in a widget factory. She makes 38 cents for each widget she correctly paints. The production rate is 50 widgets per hour. What is her gross pay for an 8-hour shift if she meets her production rate? We have to do 2 things here. We know how much she makes per widget. We know what her production rate is, but we want to find her gross pay for 8 hours. But remember, production rate is associated with per hour or 1 hour. So if we find the production rate of 50 widgets and we multiply that by the 38 cents per widget, we find that she makes $19 an hour. Then we simply multiply that by the 8 hours that she works, and we find that her gross pay for the day is $152. Unit 2, Review Part 2, Wages and Compensation, Pay Stubs. My first paycheck. Hey, I'm being paid peanuts. I distinctly said sardines. Well, we know the cat's not happy. Let's see what we can do with pay stubs. We'll try a few practice problems. Use the pay stub on the slide to answer the questions. Ready? We have a pay stub for Carolyn's florist. Number 1, what is the year-to-date net pay? That's right. The year-to-date net pay is $1,594.35. Make sure you're looking in the year-to-date row and not in the current row. Number 2, what is the gross pay? The gross pay is $378.75. You want to make sure that you're in the current earnings section. Notice this section is all your withholdings and deductions and totals, and then your earnings are up here in a separate section. Number 3, what is the regular pay? Did you guess $300? That would be correct. Again, that's her current earnings, or her current regular pay is $300. What is the overtime pay? Again, this is talking about her earnings. So you should be at the current section in the earnings section, and you would see that her overtime pay is $78.75. Number 5, what is the overtime pay rate? Well, now that one was a little tricky because it's not found on her pay stub. But you know how to calculate overtime pay rate. You take the rate of pay, which in this case is $7.50. We multiply it by that 1.5 for time and a half, and we find that her overtime pay rate is $11.25. If you take that dollar amount, multiply it by her overtime hours, it should equal her overtime pay. Remember, it's really important to check your pay stubs. Number 6, what is the current federal tax? Did you remember that a tax is a withholding or deduction? So we should be in the bottom section and the current row, and it's $56.81. And our final question, number 7, what is the current net pay? To find the current net pay, notice it is not on this pay stub, we must take her current gross pay and subtract out federal and state taxes, FICA, medical, and then she has some tool expenses and uniform expenses for the job. When we subtract all of those out, we find that her total net pay for this pay period is $187.51. And notice the pay period is listed on here as well. So use the announcements and the feedback that I have left you on your assignments for more review. Good luck!